All right, so we're diving into Pushpa 2. The rule today,
Okay.
a stack of reviews here.
Yeah.
And
Looking forward to this.
it's the sequel to the Telugu action hit.
Big hit.
Yeah, and it's generating some serious buzz from what I'm seeing.
Sure.
So we want to know
Yeah.
if it lives up to the hype. And these reviews are
All over the place.
kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Some are calling Allu Arjun's performance incredible, even transcendent.
Right.
But others are saying that the story feels disjointed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This is going to be good.
This is going to be interesting.
Yeah. It seems like we've got a real puzzle on our hands.
Okay.
A film that's provoking.
Yeah.
Strong reactions, both positive and negative.
Yeah.
So let's
try to.
Yeah, let's see if we can piece together what's working, what's not, and ultimately whether Pushpa 2 is worth your time.
Yeah. That sounds like a plan. And speaking of things that work, one thing that jumps out from every single review is the praise for Allu Arjun.
Oh, yeah.
They're all saying that he completely owns this movie as Pushpa Raj.
It seems like he's just embodying the character.
I mean, we're talking rave reviews across the board for him.
It's true.
Yeah.
Even the critics who point out flaws in the film's pacing or the plot can't help but acknowledge the sheer power of Allu Arjun's performance.
Right.
It seems like he's managed to create a truly captivating character.
Okay, but how? What are the reviewers saying specifically about his performance?
Yeah.
Because just saying he's captivating doesn't really tell us much, does it?
You're right.
Yeah.
The specifics.
Yeah.
Several reviews point to the Jathara sequence as a prime example of Allu Arjun's talent.
Okay.
They describe his movements as incredibly fluid, almost balletic, but with this raw, animalistic energy.
Oh, wow.
Apparently, the scene blends dance drama and action in a way that is utterly mesmerizing.
Hold on. I actually read one review that described the camera work in that scene as being kinetic and disorienting.
Okay, interesting.
They weren't necessarily saying it was a bad thing, but they definitely pointed it out as a stylistic choice.
Uh-huh.
How does that fit in with the whole balletic description?
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
And it highlights how Sukumar, the director, uses contrasting styles to create a sense of controlled chaos.
Okay.
So you have Allu Arjun's movements, which are precise and deliberate, juxtaposed with this frenetic camera work that mirrors the energy of the crowd.
I see.
It's almost like the filmmaking itself is a reflection of Pushpa's character, this blend of raw power and calculated strategy.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned Sukumar's direction,
Right.
the reviews seem pretty divided on his work here.
Interesting.
He's definitely aiming for something grand and epic,
Oh, for sure.
but not everyone's convinced he pulled it off.
Yeah, there's a sense that Sukumar's ambition might have gotten the better of him in this film.
Oh.
The runtime alone, over 3 hours, is a point of contention for some critics.
Yeah, that's long.
Yeah, they argue that the film feels bloated and could have benefited from tighter editing.
Okay.
It's almost as if he throws everything at the wall to see what sticks,
Right.
but doesn't quite manage to create a cohesive whole.
Which is a shame, because with a lead performance as strong as Allu Arjun's,
You'd think?
you would think the rest of the film would follow suit.
Yeah, you would think.
Yeah.
And this brings us to another point of contention, the antagonist.
Oh, huh.
While Allu Arjun shines as Pushpa Raj, the reviews suggest that Fahadh Faasil's character, SP Banwar Singh Shekhawat, doesn't quite hit the mark.
Really? What's the issue there? Because Fahadh was fantastic in the first Pushpa film.
He was
He was menacing.
incredible.
Unpredictable. You never knew what he was going to do next.
Exactly. And that's where the disappointment seems to stem from.
Okay.
Several critics point out that his character in the sequel feels almost cartoonish,
Really?
relying on exaggerated mannerisms and over-the-top dialogue. There's a sense that the complexity and nuance that Fahadh brought to the role in the first film is missing here.
So is it a problem with the writing the direction or Fahadh's performance itself? Where does the blame lie?
It's difficult to say for sure without seeing the film ourselves,
Right.
but the reviews seem to suggest that the issue lies more in the way the character is written and directed rather than Fahadh's performance itself.
Okay.
It seemed like Sukumar wanted to create a more larger-than-life villain,
Yeah.
but in doing so, he sacrificed some of the depth and psychological complexity that made the character so compelling in the first place.
Okay, so we have this incredibly strong lead performance, a potentially underwhelming villain, and a director whose ambition might have outweighed his ability to execute.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we should be aware of before we get into the nitty-gritty of the plot and themes?
Yes. There's one more element I think is worth flagging right away, and it's tied to both the pacing issues and Sukumar's direction. Many of the reviews highlight the film's impressive action sequences and emotional beats. But there's a sense that these moments don't always connect well or move the plot forward.
So it's like getting a bunch of amazing puzzle pieces that don't quite fit together.
Yes.
You can admire the individual pieces, but the overall picture remains incomplete.
Precisely.
Is that what you were saying?
And that seems to be a recurring theme in the reviews, this disconnect between the individual moments and the overall narrative structure.
Okay.
It makes me wonder if Sukumar prioritizes spectacle over substance, relying on these dazzling set pieces to distract from a potentially weaker plot.
All right, so that's a pretty clear warning for anyone going into this film expecting a tight, well-paced story.
Right.
It sounds like you're in for a wild ride, but maybe not a narratively satisfying one.
Yeah.
So let's take a closer look at what's actually happening in this story, shall we?
Let's delve into the plot and see what we can glean from these reviews.
Okay.
Perhaps there are hidden gems beneath the surface moments of brilliance that redeem the film's structural flaws.
Okay, let's do it. I'm honestly curious to see how they handle the story after the cliffhanger ending of the first film.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
All right. Picking up from that cliffhanger ending, it seems like Pushpa 2 plunges us right back into the murky world of red sandalwood smuggling.
Okay.
The stakes are higher. Pushpa's ambition is even more ferocious, and he's facing threats from all sides.
Yeah, that makes sense. The first film really set the stage for an epic power struggle.
It did.
But we were just talking about how the director seems to prioritize spectacle over storytelling.
Right.
Did the reviews give us any clues about how that plays out in the actual plot of the sequel?
Well, there's definitely a sense that the film is packed with action.
Okay.
One reviewer even called it a non-stop adrenaline rush.
Wow.
But they also pointed out that some of the plot points feel rushed or underdeveloped.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, for instance, several reviews mention a subplot involving a rival gang trying to muscle in on Pushpa's territory. But it sounds like this rivalry is established and then resolved fairly quickly without much exploration of the motivations or consequences.
So it's like a missed opportunity to add some complexity to the story.
Exactly. It's there to provide conflict and raise the stakes.
Right.
But it doesn't seem to contribute much to the overall narrative arc.
Okay.
And this brings us back to the issue of pacing.
Yeah.
Even with all the action and drama, some critics feel that the film lacks a sense of urgency or momentum.
That's weird, right? You'd think a movie about a red sandalwood smuggler constantly battling rivals and the police would be full of tension.
You would think.
What are they saying is missing?
It seems like the emotional core might be getting lost in all the chaos.
Okay.
While reviews acknowledge that there are emotional moments, they suggest that these moments don't always land with the impact you'd expect.
You know, I was thinking about this earlier when we were talking about Allu Arjun's performance.
Yeah.
There's that one review that mentioned he brings vulnerability to the character of Pushpa, but didn't really explain how. I'm wondering if those moments of vulnerability are what's missing from the overall emotional arc of the film.
That's an interesting connection.
Yeah.
It's possible that those smaller, more intimate character moments were getting overshadowed by the larger-than-life action sequences.
Right.
And this is where the director's choices really come into play.
Yeah.
If he's constantly prioritizing spectacle and visual flair, he might be sacrificing opportunities to develop those quieter, more character-driven scenes.
You know, it's making me think of another action film I saw recently where the director used these long, silent takes to really focus on the main character's face.
Oh, yeah.
And let us see the emotions playing out beneath the surface. It was so effective because it gave you a chance to connect with the character on a deeper level, even in the midst of all the action.
That's a fantastic example. It highlights how important it is for a director to create space for those nuanced performances to shine through.
Right.
And from what I'm gathering from these reviews, that might be where Pushpa falls short. It's all about the big, explosive moments, but it seems like it might be lacking in those smaller, more subtle details that build real emotional connection.
Okay, so even with a powerhouse performance from Allu Arjun,
Right.
it sounds like the emotional stakes aren't as high as they could be because the director isn't giving those moments the space to breathe.
Yeah.
But we haven't talked much about the supporting characters.
Right.
What are the reviews saying about them? Are there any standouts besides Allu Arjun?
Actually, yes. Several reviews praise Rashmika Mandanna's performance as Frivalli Pushpa's love interest.
Okay.
They point out that she's not just a damsel in distress or a passive love interest. She has her own motivations and agency, and she challenges Pushpa in interesting ways.
I remember in the first film she had this really strong independent spirit.
Yes.
It's good to hear they're continuing that thread in the sequel.
Exactly. And it sounds like her relationship with Pushpa is more complex this time around.
Oh, okay.
They're navigating the challenges of their marriage, their personal ambitions, and the dangerous world they inhabit.
That actually sounds pretty compelling.
It is.
It's refreshing to hear that the female lead isn't just relegated to a stereotypical role.
It definitely seems like a positive aspect of the film.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to something we discussed earlier. The idea that even with its flaws, Pushpa 2 might still offer some compelling character dynamics and moments of emotional depth.
Okay, so we've got a potentially underwhelming villain pacing issues.
Right.
But some strong performances, especially from Allu Arjun and Rashmika Mandanna.
Uh-huh.
What about the thematic stuff? We talked in the beginning about how the reviews mention themes of ambition, power, and societal struggle.
Right.
Do those themes come through clearly in the story?
That's where things get a bit more ambiguous.
Okay.
While those themes are certainly present in the film, it's not clear whether the director explores them with any real depth or nuance.
Give me an example.
Well, take the theme of ambition.
Huh?
Pushpa is clearly driven by a desire to rise to the top to accumulate wealth and power.
Okay.
But the reviews don't seem to delve into the motivations behind that ambition.
Right.
Is it simply greed? Is it a thirst for revenge? Is he trying to escape a cycle of poverty and oppression?
You know, I'm wondering if the director even attempts to answer those questions, or if he's just content to present Pushpa's ambition as a given without exploring the psychological or social forces that might be shaping it.
That's a very valid point.
Yeah.
And it ties into the larger question of whether Pushpa 2 is more interested in providing spectacle and entertainment, or whether it genuinely wants to engage with these complex themes in a meaningful way.
So are you saying that the themes are there, but they're more like window dressing than integral parts of the story?
That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
It's as if the director uses these themes to add a veneer of depth and social commentary.
Yeah.
But he doesn't really commit to exploring them fully.
Which is a shame because there's so much potential there.
I agree.
You've got this character who's operating outside the law, challenging the status quo, and embodying this rebellious spirit.
Yeah.
But if the film doesn't dig deeper into the why behind his action, then it risks feeling hollow and superficial.
Exactly. And that seems to be the main criticism leveled against the film by those who find it disappointing.
Yeah.
It has all the elements of a great story, compelling characters, high stakes, a vibrant setting, and thought-provoking themes.
Right.
But it doesn't quite manage to weave them together into a cohesive and satisfying whole.
Okay, so where does that leave us? We've got spectacular visuals, incredible action sequences, strong performances from the leads,
Right.
but a plot that feels rushed, an underwhelming villain, and thematic exploration that lacks depth.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag.
I'm starting to wonder if this is one of those films that's better in concept than in execution.
Perhaps. But before we reach a final verdict, I think it's important to consider the cultural context and the conversations that Pushpa 2 is sparking.
Okay.
Because even if it's not a perfect film, it's clearly resonating with audiences on a certain level.
Okay, let's talk about that. What are the reviews saying about the cultural impact of this film? So we talked about the plot, the characters, the themes, even the director's choices.
Right.
But let's zoom out a bit.
Okay.
What are these reviews saying about the cultural impact of Pushpa 2? Because from what I'm gathering, it's more than just your average action flick.
You're absolutely right. One of the most interesting things I'm noticing in these reviews is how Pushpa 2 taps into a sense of regional pride and identity.
Okay.
The film is deeply rooted in the culture and landscape of the Rayalaseema region. And it seems to be resonating strongly with audiences who identify with that specific cultural background.
Yeah, I remember reading one review that described the film as a love letter to Rayalaseema.
Oh, wow.
They talked about how the director captured the unique dialect, the music, the traditions, even the way people dress and interact with each other. It sounds like those details are woven into the very fabric of the film.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just superficial representation. The film's themes of rebellion and challenging authority seem to resonate deeply with the historical and social context of the region.
Right.
Rayalaseema has a long history of resistance against various forms of power, and it seems like Pushpa 2 is tapping into that spirit.
So it's like the film is speaking to something deeper, something that goes beyond just entertainment.
Yeah.
It's connecting with audiences on a cultural and emotional level,
Yeah.
reflecting their own experiences and aspirations.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this speaks to a larger trend in Indian cinema, a movement away from the traditional Bollywood formula and towards stories that represent the diversity and richness of India's various regions and cultures.
I've noticed that too. It seems like there's been a real surge in films from different parts of India,
Yeah.
each with its own unique flavor and perspective. And Pushpa, too, with its bold style and unapologetically regional identity, seems to be at the forefront of that movement.
Absolutely. And this is reflected in the global reception of the film as well.
Okay.
While it's certainly resonating strongly with Indian audiences, particularly those from the Rayalaseema region, it's also attracting attention internationally.
Which is interesting because you'd think a film so deeply rooted in a specific cultural context might not translate well to a global audience.
Right.
What are the international reviewers saying?
They're actually quite impressed. They might not fully grasp all the cultural nuances.
Right.
But they seem to be drawn to the film's energy, the visual spectacle, and the larger-than-life characters. It seems like Pushpa 2 is proving that stories with a strong sense of cultural identity can still have universal appeal.
I guess there's something inherently fascinating about seeing a world and a culture that's different from your own, especially when it's presented with such passion and conviction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the power of cinema to bridge cultural divides and create a shared experience.
Right.
Even if you don't understand every detail or reference, you can still be swept away by the emotion, the action, the music, and the sheer visual artistry of a film like Pushpa 2.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about the good, the bad, and the messy. We've explored the plot, the characters, the themes, the director's choices, and the cultural impact.
Yeah.
But there's still one big question looming over this entire discussion.
The question of whether Pushpa 2, the rule, lives up to the hype.
Exactly. After all this analysis, after diving deep into these reviews, what's the verdict?
Well, I don't think there's a simple yes or no answer.
Okay.
It's clear that Pushpa 2 is a flawed film. It has pacing issues, a potentially underwhelming villain, and its thematic exploration could be deeper.
But on the other hand, it's visually stunning, action-packed, and features some truly captivating performances, particularly from Allu Arjun.
And it's also culturally significant, pushing the boundaries of Indian cinema and representing a growing movement towards stories that embrace regional identity and diversity.
So it sounds like it all comes down to what you value as a viewer.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a tightly plotted, perfectly paced film with nuanced character development, Pushpa 2 might not be your cup of tea. But if you're willing to embrace the chaos, to be swept away by the spectacle, and to appreciate a film that's both entertaining and culturally resonant, then this might be right up your alley.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's a film that demands to be seen and experienced. You might love it, you might hate it, but you definitely won't be indifferent.
And isn't that the mark of a truly impactful film?
I think so.
One that sparks conversation, challenges your expectations, and stays with you long after the credits roll.
I think so. And in that sense, I'd say Pushpa 2. The rule definitely achieves its goal. It's a film that's bold, ambitious, and unapologetically itself.
Well, there you have it, our deep dive into Pushpa 2. The rule is complete. We've explored the highs and lows, the praises and criticisms, and hopefully given you a better understanding of what to expect from this cinematic roller coaster.
Remember, these are just our interpretations based on the reviews you provided.
Right.
The true test is watching the film for yourself and forming your own opinion.
So go out there, watch the film, and then let us know what you think. Did it live up to your expectations? Did it challenge your assumptions? Did it leave you wanting more? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And who knows, maybe your insights will inspire us to take another deep dive into the world of Pushpa in the future.
Until then, thanks for joining us, and happy viewing.